Welcome to Real Estate in Real Time. I'm Woody Zimmerman here with Mark Skabowski of Remax Lakes, and welcome to the show.
Here we are, morning.
Good morning. All right, so let's see here. It's supposed to be spring.
Oh,
It's
good
been
Lord.
we've been all over the place. It's like it was last weekend. I woke up going to church, and I grab a jacket, walk outside. I don't need a jacket. But by the afternoon, we had thunderstorms. By Monday, we've got snow, and we just had a whirlwind of a week.
Literally, we had the tornado blow through one night.
Yeah,
Rain came
yes.
through. We got the alarm. I don't know, freaked my dog out.
Oh yeah.
The thunderstorm that came through. I forget what day that was, but it
Sunday.
was pretty exciting.
Yeah.
Um,
And then back to good weather.
and then back to good weather, and
for the
then
weekend, yeah.
freezing, and I'm ready for it to be 70 and sunshine.
Yeah, me too.
I don't need 90 in sunshine.
Mhm.
I'll take 70 in sunshine.
Yeah, and that's when the market really picks up. Is when the weather turns.
When the weather turns,
And
it
it's
goes.
consistently nice.
Absolutely, but we're not there yet.
No, we're definitely not there yet.
Just
but-
like the market is not consistent at this
Mhm.
point.
Yeah,
I mean,
no.
it's definitely. I think we talked last week how that we're down year over year,
Yeah.
and that trend continues. It seems slower than what it has been in the past.
Mhm.
A lot of that has to do with interest rates. They have been stubborn. They're back. The average is 6.25, 6 3/8. You might luck out and get 6%.
Yeah.
And what I've consistently said is it's got to get below 6 for the market to take off.
Yeah.
We're just not there. With the uncertainty in the economy. You watch the stock market; it's all over the map, and that's not just the economy, but that's there's concern with what things are going. There's no certainty. Where are we going? We're on an upswing. We're on a downswing. Nobody really knows. Gas prices jumped up again.
Yeah.
Because of the stuff in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Hopefully that'll be resolved here. In a relatively short period of time, things will stabilize. We got spring break coming up, and you got, is my flight going to make it or not? People are worried about a lot of other stuff besides buying a house
Mhm.
at this point. But long term, the spring is definitely the busier time. It's where it starts to ramp up.
Mhm.
So I thought we'd talk today for sellers, about the reasons that agreements fall apart or a purchase agreement falls apart.
Okay.
From a seller's perspective, what can you control when it comes to that? We can all control the condition of our house within reason. I get a lot of questions. Should I put a new kitchen in? Should I put this in? Well, if you're going to sell it, it doesn't make sense to spend that money because in all likelihood, you're probably not going to get it back.
Mhm.
Now, if you need to sell and you're trying to minimize what those costs are in selling, well, then put it in the best possible shape that you can. And when I'm saying that, about 70% of the transaction, well, that's what the statistics say, is 70% of the deals that fall apart are due to inspection issues. So if I'm a seller, what parts of those inspection issues can I take care of in advance?
Okay.
Many agents promote a pre-listing inspection. You can do that, but then I've also heard sellers say, well, I had it inspected, I fixed everything they said, and the buyer had an inspection, and their inspector found other stuff. Well, what I would say is inspectors are going to focus on different areas based on their backgrounds. They're going to check the same things. In all likelihood, they're going to come up with many of the same things, but a different inspector is going to have a different perspective, just like a different appraiser is going to have a different perspective.
Mhm.
A different agent's going to have a different perspective. So, you can do the pre-listing inspection to try to resolve some of those things, or you can take a look at your house from top to bottom. Look at it with a buyer's eye.
Mhm.
As we were talking a little bit off air, I know I have some things in my house that, it's okay. I know it.
Mhm.
It's not the end of the world to me that something doesn't work, or, I flip a light on and only 2 bulbs come on. Well, I'll change that light bulb when I want to.
Yeah.
Well, if you're going to sell it, you want your house in premium condition so that when the inspector comes through, they're finding 1 or 2 things, not 10 or 15 things.
Right.
And major things. And in our area, radon is definitely one of those things. You could have, it can be tested, it can be resolved. You can buy a test on Amazon. You can go to Lowe's and buy a radon test. in advance. You can get, at least you know what your radon level is.
Sure.
And you could have a system installed if you need it. The nice thing is radon's either there or it's not there. If you don't have it, you're golden.
Yeah.
If it's there, buyers are probably going to ask you to take care of it. And the bottom line is, why would you risk selling your house for something that you already know about? Or why go in, hear no evil, see no evil, speak no evil.
Right.
You want to really look at your house, top to bottom, look for things that, potentially could pop up in an inspection. Not just light bulbs, but overall the curb appeal. Clean the yard outside. Now that's not going to make it fall apart in inspections, but it sets the tone for the inspection. The inspector pulls up, they're human, and they look at a house and it looks like junk out front.
Right.
What is their expectation when they walk in the door?
Well, absolutely. It's like going to a restaurant. You go to the bathroom. If the bathroom's dirty, then you just immediately think, I bet the kitchen's dirty.
The kitchen's dirty.
But if the bathroom's clean, I bet the kitchen's clean. I mean, it's just, it's easy to put it together.
Easy to put it together, and it sets the tone.
Yeah.
So, and after the break, we can talk about a couple other things that you can take care of to hopefully get through that inspection period without losing the deal.
All right, you're listening to Real Estate in Real Time. We'll be right back. Welcome back. You're listening to Real Estate in Real Time. I'm Woody Zimmerman here with Mark Skabowski of Remax Lakes, and we're talking about things that you can do to avoid losing the deal.
Yeah, and as we were talking before the break, 70% of transactions, purchase agreements fall apart due to inspection issues. So some things that I've learned through the years, inspectors will always write up that if a furnace has not been serviced. So if you haven't had it serviced, get it serviced before you list your house. If nothing else, it's help making the safety for yourselves. If you've got a leaking heat exchanger, hey, we've been waking up with headaches, for the last month. Why? I don't know. Well, maybe it's this, maybe it's that. It could be your furnace. Carbon monoxide poisoning, right? The heat exchanger in your furnace is bad. But inspectors will note, they will pull the covers off of the furnace, they'll put the age of the furnace, but they'll also note that it appears that it hasn't been serviced.
Yeah.
So it's a $200 fix, depends on who you use, what they charge to come out and service your furnace. Well, at least there's a record that it's been serviced.
Right.
And think about that, like we were talking about, you walk into a house, it looks like junk. If there's a consistent record of service, what's that tell you? The owner, pride of ownership. They've taken care of the home.
Yes.
At least taken care of that part. Radon, we talked about before. Light switches, make sure that if you flip a switch, what's it do? At least I mean, I see that written up on reports all the time. Inspector, there was a bank of 4 light switches.
Yeah.
Couldn't find what the 4th switch did.
Right.
Maybe it was it's nice if you have that answer. Now again, that is not a reason for a buyer to get out, that the switch didn't work.
Right.
But if we're trying to minimize the number of items that are going to be written up on an inspection report, or we can answer those things very quickly, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to smooth that inspection process over. So beyond that, you can easily buy one of those little plug-ins that tell you if you've got a grounded outlet or ungrounded outlet, or reverse polarity. It's not the end of the world if it's one piece, but if the entire house is reverse polarity, probably ought to take care of that before it goes in. It's a safety issue. It's a potential safety issue. And I'm not saying every buyer is going to walk because you have reverse polarity outlets or ungrounded outlets, but the likelihood is you could run into that one, right? Because buyers today have a lot more options than they did back in the days when they were buying anything. They were waiving inspections, they were waiving appraisals, all of those things. So we're trying to remove the little things that we can control in the transaction to where we don't have a hiccup along the way. Because nothing worse than getting an accepted offer, thinking you're going to move, and then it fall apart due to inspection.
Okay, well, what if you have a buyer who thinks that, or they're acting like they're buying a house that's 100 years old, but they're acting like, hey, I need to be buying this house, needs to be absolutely 100% perfect.
Yeah, you're never going to get past that. There's no solution to that.
Okay.
And I've dealt with it. When it's frustrating from an agent's perspective, especially when usually those are buyers that are in a specific price range. has been my experience.
Okay.
They can't afford much different. This is about as good as you're going to get. They'll have to move on, and they'll be renters for a lot longer.
So control what you can control.
Control what you can control. And at that point, if you do have an older home like that, we see simple things like I mentioned, the reverse polarity, ungrounded outlets. There are things that you can do in advance that are not that expensive to fix that.
Mm-hmm.
You can put a GFCI breaker in a panel on a circuit that gives you that protection.
Mm-hmm.
Instead of a grounded outlet, you've got, it'll pop if there's something goes on in there.
Yeah.
It's in the panel. You don't rewire the whole house. You don't redo it. If you've got 2-prong outlets in a house, and I did it with my first house, because at the time we had to break that third ground plug off, right?
Yeah, right.
So he took, and all the 2 prongs, we made 3-prong. It was still ungrounded, which is a no-no. It's okay to have ungrounded outlets. You just can't put them out there as if they're grounded. So instead of having those 3 prongs, you put the GFCI in the breaker box, and you've cured that problem. Or if you had 3 prongs and it's ungrounded, put the 2 prongs back in.
Yeah.
Because that way at least they see it when they come in,
Right.
and you're not going to be required to fix it at that point.
Okay.
So again, just trying to take the small pieces out. Light bulbs, fix the light bulbs. Change the light bulbs
Well,
out.
that's simple. That's
Simple stuff.
Yeah.
Know where the switches are. Have your furnace serviced. Clean up outside. If you got a leaky faucet, fix it. Right? If you've got a shower door that leaks, fix it.
Mm-hmm.
If you have those things, fix it before you get into a transaction. Because buyers, again, they've got more options. And you never know. And my experience in 20 years of doing this is if buyer and seller both want the transaction to close, the transaction will close.
Okay.
Somehow, some way, you'll get it done.
Mm-hmm.
If one of the parties wants out, and usually it's not the seller that wants out, usually it's the buyer that wants out.
Yeah.
If the buyer wants out, they will do everything in their power to try to get out.
Mm-hmm.
They just will. Again, it's human nature. They saw another house that maybe is a better fit for them. Somewhere, something else has popped on the market. They're not truly committed to your house. So what we're doing from a seller's perspective is trying to take all those potential reasons for not buying out, even at the smallest level of detail. We want to go through that house and make sure that everything functions, it's sealed, we don't have drippy faucets, we don't, all of those things. Make sure you do that. And beyond that, on the seller's disclosure, disclose the actual condition of the property.
Mm-hmm.
Make sure if you have had water in the basement, if you get water in the basement, disclose that it's there.
Yes,
We're
absolutely.
protecting you long term.
Yep, absolutely.
Yeah.
All right. So put your best foot forward.
Absolutely.
All right. If you'd like to continue this conversation with Mark, make sure you reach out your contact info.
Sure. Website, skabowskiteam.com. Phone numbers, 574-527-0660. You can always email me, mark@skabowskiteam.com.
Very good. You've been listening to Real Estate in Real Time. Have yourself a wonderful weekend.